The last parliamentary elections in Bulgaria on October 27, 2024, saw scandalous electoral fraud questioning the foundations of the European Union as a whole. This is the conclusion of a KLA-TV investigative research based on witness statements and published film documents. To enter parliament in Bulgaria, a party needs 4% of the votes cast. The opposition party Velice achieved 3.999% of the votes after the count, and therefore the Velice party did not achieve the required 4% of the vote and was unable to enter the new Bulgarian parliament.
Velice was 29 votes short of entering parliament, and thus the party remains outside the National Assembly ultimately.
The leading candidate of the Velice party, Evelin Mihailov, testifies that he was threatened with the result of 3.999% in a confidential conversation before the vote count was completed.
During this time, between 11 a.m. and 5:30 p.m., I received a call with an offer of 100 million euros to be placed under Delian Peevski. 100 million euros, or if I refuse, the party will not get in. It will get 3.99%, and what will happen is that I would be arrested. I even had a press release before the count was finished, because during the count it looked like Velice was going to get in. I received calls from several TV stations asking for a comment, and I said, no, Velice will not move in because I refused this bribe offer. And at 5:30 p.m. the final result was known, 0.21%. The count took 6.5 hours, leaving Velice 21 votes short of entering the National Assembly. 3.999% to demonstrate their strength and show that they could shape the election even down to one vote exactly as they wished.
Obviously, the current Bulgarian government will stop at nothing to bribe genuine opposition members or to heavily threaten them. Mihailov's statement might probably be just the tip of the iceberg of a gigantic swamp of fraud. In order to expose this electoral fraud of this corrupt government, the opposition party Velice, together with other members of the previous Bulgarian parliament, lodged a complaint against the election result with the Bulgarian Constitutional Court. On the basis of credible witness statements and film footage, Velice was able to bring the election fraud to light in court. In the following, you will see just a few examples of a large number of film evidence and witness statements published on various websites.
The following 3 videos are recordings from official surveillance cameras, which must be installed in the voting booths according to Bulgarian law. At the time of the video recordings, voting had already ended, the polling stations were closed to the public, and the votes were being counted. To understand the fraud, the following preliminary remark is important. In Bulgaria, each ballot paper must be stamped by the election supervisor in front of the voter, and a corner of the ballot paper must be cut or torn off. This is a prerequisite for the vote to be counted as valid. In this video, you can see a poll worker tearing corners off ballot papers during the count. Why do none of the other election workers report this obvious fraud? The whole election team seems to be part of the corruption. In this polling station, first a stamp and then a pair of scissors are passed around inconspicuously. Once again, for repetition, ballot papers must never be stamped or cut off during the count. And this is even being done here in batches, so here is massive fraud. The next thing you see is ballot papers being crumpled up and whole piles being thrown into the bin. The following recording is particularly significant as the distribution of votes is discussed quite openly during the count. Apparently, certain parties can even wish for votes. What are you calculating in the dark? Gap want me to give them plus 25. Aha, they want. They want 7, 12, 18, 26, 28, 8.
After all, the Bulgarian Constitutional Court had to admit the electoral fraud, and Velice entered the parliament with 10 MPs after the verdict had been announced on March 13, 2025. The court only checked a random sample of approximately 15% of the voting booths. What remains scandalous about this ruling is that the court did not allow a review or recount in all voting booths, which leaves the actual extent of the electoral fraud still in the dark. Iveli Mihailov commented on this as follows.
Velice would have gotten 2 or 3 times as many votes, because I had information during the election from the sociological agencies that examined the results. And at first we had a very high result. Then we also have our sympathizers in the information services who told us that they took votes away from us first around 3:30 p.m. and the second time this person from the information service said, "I have never experienced such a brutal cut, where at least 150,000 votes were taken away from us."
As a result of the court ruling on March 13, 2025, the composition of the Bulgarian parliament changed. However, a majority in the election of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, which had already taken place, had been achieved by only 8 votes from MPs who had not been legally elected. And after the verdict, they lost their mandate again. At a press conference, Mihailov therefore emphasized the illegitimacy of the elected government.
Yesterday we conducted an investigation in order to determine how many of the MPs that were deemed illegally elected by the Constitutional Court took part in the election of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. And it turned out that 8 MPs took part in the election of the Prime Minister. We have listed them by name: Alexander Markov, Andrei Volchev, Emil Trivonov, Eshref, Ivan Kyuchukov, Pavlin Yotov, Temenushka Petkova. If we remove these 8 MPs from the election of the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister, it turns out that the required majority of the election of this government does not exist, rendering all its decisions after January 16, 2025 unlawful. And we will start consultations with other parties to ask the Constitutional Court to annul the decisions of the Council of Ministers as they are unlawful. This can be observed in practice when we make a deal and it turns out that the previous deal was fraudulent in some way. Something did not go properly. The person who made the last deal loses all rights, where after the irregularity, all subsequent actions are unlawful. The same applies to the election of the National Assembly and the Prime Minister. If we have illegally elected MPs, and they were involved in such an important decision, it means that the National Assembly and the Council of Ministers are illegitimate, and all their actions since then would have to be considered illegitimate.
After the court ruling, Velice also submitted the election fraud documents to the EU in Brussels, protesting against the proven election fraud. However, the EU Commission, under the leadership of Ursula von der Leyen, has still not reacted to this electoral fraud scandal in the EU member state Bulgaria. Instead, Ursula von der Leyen continues to hug and embrace the former Bulgarian head of government, Borisov, who continues to pull the strings of the ruling party in the background. This scandal in Bulgaria raises serious questions for the EU Commission in Brussels and its president, Ursula von der Leyen. While she has sanctioned EU critical governments of Hungary and Poland with so-called rule of law proceedings, there is not even the threat of such proceedings in the case of Bulgaria. Why is Ursula von der Leyen not reacting to the proven election fraud and the associated allegations of corruption? In Bulgaria's neighboring state of Romania, elections have been declared invalid, and promising candidates were not admitted. Is the EU exerting massive influence on the elections in the member states so that only EU-friendly candidates would form the government? Are corrupt and fraudulently elected EU heads of government even desirable so that they can be influenced and blackmailed by the EU? The fact that the government-funded Bulgarian system media have not condemned this exposed election fraud in the strongest possible way shows that this cannot be about free independent media. Obviously, the Bulgarian system media are covering up corruption and fraud, and therefore are preventing it from being uncovered. Dear viewers, would you like to take action and do something against corruption and election fraud? If yes, do help to bring the scandal to public attention by forwarding this documentary video to your friends and acquaintances. By doing so, show the red card to the unscrupulous masterminds. Thank you for your help, so our society will be swept free from corruption and electoral fraud, not just in Bulgaria.